White woman beats black girl to coma until sisters call to dad grounds the plane. But what happened in those moments before the beating, before a 12-year-old child's body went limp on the floor of Delta Flight 1847, reveals something far more sinister about the racism that still infects every corner of American life. You black girls need to move to the back where you belong. The elderly white woman's voice cut through the cabin like a knife, sharp and venomous and absolute. This isn't a place for your kind. The back of the plane is where people like you sit. The words hit 14-year-old Naomi Williams like a physical slap. Her 12-year-old sister Zara, sitting beside her in seat 14B, grabbed her hand instinctively, fingers trembling. They were on American Airlines Flight 1847 from Detroit to Houston, flying to see their mother who lay in a hospital bed fighting stage 3 breast cancer. Their hearts were already heavy with worry and fear and the desperate hope that Mama would recover. Now this. Now a white woman standing over them with hatred in her eyes, demanding they move like it was 1955, like Rosa Parks had never refused, like the civil rights movement had never happened. But here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Racism didn't die with the passage of laws or the election of a black president. It evolved. It adapted. It learned to hide in polite language and corporate policies. And sometimes, like today, it stopped hiding altogether. Sometimes it showed its face openly, confidently, knowing that even in 2025, even with cameras everywhere, even with witnesses watching, it could still win. The racism these two young girls faced wasn't a relic of the past. It was alive, thriving, more brazen than ever because it had learned that outrage fades and consequences rarely come. Naomi looked at the white woman standing in the aisle, at her expensive clothing and jewelry that screamed wealth and privilege, at the disgust twisting her aged face. And Naomi felt something break inside her chest. Not surprise. She'd been followed in stores. She'd been told her natural hair was unprofessional. She'd watched teachers assume she was less intelligent than her white classmates. At 14, she'd already accumulated a lifetime of small cuts from racism's blade. But this? Being told to move to the back of a plane while traveling to see her dying mother? This cut deeper than anything before. "Ma'am," Naomi said, her voice shaking but trying to stay respectful the way her parents had taught her, "we're sitting in our assigned seats. These are our seats. We paid for them." "I don't care what you paid for," the white woman hissed, her face reddening with rage. "You don't belong here. This is first class. This is for decent people. Not for people like you." Zara started crying, silent tears streaming down her 12-year-old face. She'd been so excited that morning despite their worry about Mama. First time flying without parents. First time in first class because Daddy had used miles to upgrade them so they'd be comfortable during this hard trip. She'd felt grown up, important, special. Now she felt small and scared and confused about why this woman hated them when they hadn't done anything wrong. Around them, passengers in rows 12 through 16 had gone completely silent. A businessman in a gray suit stared at his laptop screen, pretending he couldn't hear. A young couple looked uncomfortable but said nothing. An elderly man pulled out his phone and started recording, the little red light blinking, but his mouth stayed closed. A flight attendant, a young black woman named Christine, had rushed over when the confrontation started, trying to calm the situation, explaining that the girls were in their correct seats, that there was no issue. But the white woman had dismissed her with a wave of her hand like swatting away an insect. "These girls are bothering me," the white woman announced loudly. "I want them moved. I paid good money for first class and I shouldn't have to sit near them." Christine's professionalism was cracking. "Ma'am, these young ladies have assigned seats. They have every right to be here. I can't move them and I won't move them." The white woman's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Then maybe I need to handle this myself." She reached down toward her expensive designer shoe, and Naomi felt her blood turn cold. If you believe no child should be told they don't belong somewhere because of their skin color, keep watching. If you think racism on airplanes is something we left in the 1960s, you need to see what happens in the next 60 seconds. And if you've ever been treated like you were less than human because of how you look, drop a comment below and tell us your story. We're reading every single one. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. This story doesn't end the way you think. What this white woman does next will shock you. And what the older sister does to stop the plane will change everything. Hit that like button if you stand against racism, and subscribe to this channel because we're exposing the incidents that airlines don't want you to see. What happens next will haunt you. But to understand how two innocent black girls ended up in a confrontation that would stop a plane mid-departure and land a wealthy white woman in criminal court, we need to go back 8 hours to that morning in Detroit when everything still felt manageable, when the biggest worry was whether Mama would recognize them through the pain medication. Naomi Williams was 14 years old, an 8th grader at Cass Technical High School with a 3.9 GPA and dreams of becoming a pediatric oncologist. She wanted to heal children with cancer because she'd watched cancer try to steal her mother. She was responsible, mature beyond her years, the kind of kid teachers called dependable. She braided her sister's hair every morning. She made sure homework got done. She'd learned to cook basic meals when her mother got too sick to stand at the stove. At 14, she'd become half parent, half child, carrying weight no teenager should have to carry. Her sister Zara was 12, a 6th grader who loved art and basketball and making people laugh even when life wasn't funny. She drew pictures for their mother, colorful sketches of flowers and butterflies that the nurses taped to the hospital room walls. She was the optimist in the family, the one who insisted Mama would beat this, who refused to let fear win. She still slept with the stuffed elephant their mother had given her for her 8th birthday, back when life was normal, back before words like chemotherapy and mastectomy and stage 3 became part of their daily vocabulary. Their mother, Patricia Williams, had been fighting breast cancer for 11 months. 11 months of watching a strong woman who'd worked 2 jobs to give her daughters everything slowly lose her hair, her strength, her ability to hide how much pain she was in. She'd been admitted to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston 3 weeks ago for an aggressive new treatment protocol. The doctors said she was responding well. Said she might finally be turning a corner. Said the girls could visit. Their father, Marcus Williams, couldn't leave Detroit yet. His job as vice president of operations for the airline meant he was overseeing a major system upgrade that week. Critical. Time sensitive. He'd fly down in 2 days. But the girls couldn't wait. They missed their mother desperately. They needed to see her smile, hear her voice, and hold her hand. So Marcus had done what any father would do. He'd used his employee benefits to upgrade his daughters to first class, bought them direct flights, arranged for hospital staff to pick them up at Houston Hobby. He'd made it as easy and comfortable as possible because his babies were going through enough already. That morning, Marcus had made them breakfast, checked their bags 3 times, gone over emergency procedures and phone numbers. The girls had dressed carefully. Naomi wore the blue sweater her mother loved. Zara packed the new drawing she'd made. They'd been nervous but excited. Sad about why they were going but happy they'd finally see Mama. At Detroit Metropolitan Airport, everything had gone smoothly. Check-in took 5 minutes. The gate agent had smiled at them, commented on how grown-up they looked traveling alone. Security was easy. TSA agents were patient and professional. At gate A17, they'd sat together sharing a muffin, playing games on Zara's tablet, texting their father updates. Other passengers had barely noticed them. Just 2 black girls among hundreds of travelers going about their business. Boarding Group 1 was called and the Williams sisters had walked down the jetway holding hands, a habit from childhood they hadn't outgrown. The plane was a newer Boeing 737 with leather seats and plenty of legroom in first class. Rows 14A and 14B. Window and middle. Naomi took the middle so Zara could see outside. They'd stowed their backpacks, buckled in, sent their father a quick text with a photo. "We made it. Love you, Daddy." Other passengers boarded around them. A businessman in an expensive suit barely glanced their way. A young family with a toddler smiled at them. 2 college students with headphones ignored everyone. The flight crew had been pleasant. A tall male flight attendant helped them with overhead space. A young black flight attendant named Christine brought them water without being asked, winked at them like she understood what it meant to see young black girls in first class, like she was proud of them. Then she appeared. The elderly white woman, maybe 70 years old, dripping in diamond jewelry and designer clothing that screamed old money. She'd boarded late, walking slowly down the aisle with the entitled confidence of someone who'd never been told no. When she reached row 14, when she saw Naomi and Zara sitting there, something shifted in her expression. Disgust. Disbelief. Rage. She'd stopped, stared at them for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then she'd checked her boarding pass twice, looked at the seat numbers above their heads, and looked back at them. Her lips had pressed into a thin line. She'd turned and walked back up the aisle toward the flight attendant station, her body language radiating indignation. Naomi had watched her go and felt her stomach tighten with familiar dread. She'd seen that look before. That expression that said you don't belong here. That body language that telegraphed I'm about to make this your problem. She'd squeezed Zara's hand and whispered it's okay, we're fine, even though something told her they weren't. 5 minutes later, the white woman had returned. And instead of taking her seat in row 12, she'd stopped directly beside Naomi and Zara. She'd looked down at them with cold eyes and spoken words that would change everything. Words about the back of the plane. Words about where black girls belonged. Words soaked in racism so blatant, so undisguised, that even in 2025 they took your breath away. 𝐿_Christine, the flight attendant, had rushed over trying to de-escalate, trying to explain these girls had proper seats, trying to be professional. But the white woman wasn't interested in facts or policies or basic human decency. She was interested in putting these black children in what she considered their place. Now that expensive designer shoe was in her hand, and Naomi Williams realized with horror that this woman wasn't just going to insult them. She was going to hurt them. And nobody on this plane was going to stop her. The designer shoe came down fast and hard across Zara's face with a sickening crack that made passengers 3 rows back flinch. The 12-year-old's head snapped to the side from the impact, blood immediately streaming from her nose. She screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure shock and pain that should have made every adult on that plane jump to their feet. But nobody moved. Stop it, Naomi shouted, throwing herself between her sister and the white woman. You're hurting her. So, the shoe came down again, this time catching Naomi across the shoulder, then her arm as she tried to shield Zara. The white woman was hitting them with all her strength, her face twisted with rage and something worse than rage. Satisfaction. Like she was enjoying this. Like these 2 black girls deserved every blow for daring to sit where she thought they didn't belong. Christine, the flight attendant, grabbed the white woman's arm, trying to stop her. Ma'am, you need to stop right now. I'm calling security. You're assaulting children. The white woman shoved Christine backward with surprising strength for someone her age. Don't you touch me. These girls need to learn respect. They need to learn their place. The beating continued. Zara curled into a ball in her seat, trying to protect her face, her body shaking with sobs. Naomi kept trying to cover her sister, taking blows meant for Zara, her own face now bleeding from where the sharp edge of the shoe had caught her cheekbone. Around them, passengers sat frozen in a tableau of cowardice that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The businessman in the gray suit had his phone out, recording everything, but his mouth stayed shut. A woman in row 13 had tears streaming down her face, but she didn't stand up, didn't intervene, didn't use her adult body to shield 2 children from violence. An elderly man looked away entirely, staring at the window like if he didn't watch it wasn't happening. The young couple held hands and did nothing. The college students kept their headphones on. Someone help us, Naomi sobbed, looking around desperately at all these adults who were choosing to be witnesses instead of protectors. Please. Somebody please help my sister. The silence that met her plea was deafening. 40 people on that plane and not one had the courage to physically stop an elderly woman from beating children. They watched. They recorded. They felt uncomfortable. But they did nothing. And in their nothing, they became accomplices to the violence happening in row 14. Christine was on the phone now, her voice urgent but professional even though tears were running down her face. We have an emergency in first class. Passenger assaulting 2 minors. I need the captain and I need airport police immediately. We cannot take off. The white woman heard this and laughed, actually laughed while still holding that blood-stained shoe. You think anyone's going to care about 2 little black girls? You think I'm going to get in trouble? Do you know who my husband is? Do you know how much money I donate to this airline? She turned back to Zara, raising the shoe again, and Naomi made a decision that would save her sister's life. She pulled Zara out of the seat and onto the floor of the cabin, covering her completely with her own body, taking the blows on her back, her shoulders, and her head. Each impact sent shock waves of pain through her, but she didn't move. She stayed over Zara, protecting her baby sister the way their mother would have protected them if she'd been there. "Zara," Naomi whispered, her voice breaking. "Stay with me. Don't close your eyes. Daddy's going to fix this. Mama needs us. Stay awake." But Zara's eyes were glazing over, her body going slack beneath Naomi. The 12-year-old had taken too many blows to the head. The trauma was too much. Her small body couldn't handle the violence that had been inflicted on it by an adult who should have known better, who should have been ashamed, who should have protected children instead of hurting them. Naomi screamed, shaking her sister. "Zara, wake up. Please wake up. Don't leave me." Zara. The white woman finally stepped back, breathing hard, her expensive clothing disheveled, her face flushed with exertion. She looked down at the two girls bleeding on the floor of the first-class cabin and smiled. A small, satisfied smile that said she'd accomplished exactly what she'd set out to do. She'd put them in their place. She'd shown them where black girls belonged. And she was confident, absolutely certain, that nothing would happen to her. Around her, passengers finally started moving. A man with medical training pushed past people to get to the girls. A woman was crying openly now, her guilt written across her face. Others were standing, phones still out, looking sick with what they'd witnessed and failed to stop. But their movement came too late. Their action came after the damage was done. Their courage appeared only when the violence was over. Christine knelt beside the girls, her hands shaking as she checked for pulses, for breathing, for signs of how bad this was. "Naomi, honey, I need you to move so I can check your sister." Naomi rolled off Zara and immediately the full extent of the injuries became visible. Blood matted Zara's hair. Her face was swelling, already turning purple. Her eyes were closed and she wasn't responding to her name, to touch, to anything. The man with medical training pressed his fingers to her neck, checking her pulse, and his expression went grave. "Her pulse is weak," he said quietly. "She's unresponsive. This child needs a hospital now. She needs trauma care. We're talking about potential traumatic brain injury here." The words hit Naomi like another physical blow. Brain injury. Her baby sister. Her Zara who drew pictures and made people laugh and still slept with her stuffed elephant. Zara, who they'd promised would get to see Mama, who'd been so excited this morning about the trip, who'd done nothing wrong except exist as a black girl in a space a racist woman thought she didn't deserve to occupy. Naomi looked up at the white woman who was now calmly straightening her clothing like nothing had happened. And something crystallized in that 14-year-old girl's mind. This woman wasn't going to face consequences unless Naomi made sure she did. These bystanders weren't going to help unless forced to. The system wasn't going to work unless someone with power intervened. And Naomi knew exactly who had that power. Her hands shaking violently, Naomi reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Her father had made her promise to call if anything went wrong. Well, something had gone catastrophically wrong. Her sister was unconscious on the floor of an airplane. A white woman had nearly beaten her to death. And nobody had stopped it. Naomi's fingers could barely work the screen through her tears and the blood that was dripping from her own injuries. But she managed to open her contacts. Managed to find Dad. Managed to press call. The phone rang once. Twice. And Naomi Williams, 14 years old and bleeding and terrified and enraged, waited for her father to answer. Waited for the one person she knew would make this right. Waited for justice that should have come from the 40 witnesses but would have to come from somewhere else. Because if there was one thing Naomi had learned in the last 10 minutes, it was that you couldn't count on strangers to protect black children. You couldn't trust that people would do the right thing when it was hard or uncomfortable or required them to confront racism. You could only count on family. On the people who loved you. On the ones who had the power to stop planes and change policies and make sure that women who beat children faced exactly what they deserved. The phone kept ringing. And on the floor beside her, Zara's breathing got shallower. And the white woman smiled. Marcus Williams' voice came through the phone, strong and concerned. He'd seen Naomi's name on the caller ID and immediately knew something was wrong. His daughters should have been in the air by now, not calling him. "Baby girl, what's wrong? Are you okay?" Naomi tried to speak, but all that came out was a sob. She looked down at Zara's still body, at the blood pooling on the cabin floor, at her sister's chest barely moving with shallow breaths. The man with medical training was checking Zara's pupils now, his expression getting more worried by the second. Talk to me," Marcus said, his voice rising with urgency. "What happened? Where are you?" "Daddy," Naomi finally choked out, the word breaking into pieces. "Daddy, a woman beat Zara. She beat her with her shoe. Over and over. Zara won't wake up, Daddy. She won't open her eyes. There's so much blood. I need you. I need you right now." On the other end of the line, Marcus Williams felt his entire world tilt sideways. His baby. Someone had put their hands on his baby. His 12-year-old daughter, who should have been safe on his airline, flying to see her sick mother, was hurt. Was bleeding. Was unconscious. "Are you still on the plane?" Marcus asked, his voice dropping into a tone Naomi had only heard a few times in her life. The tone that meant her father was about to move heaven and earth. "Has the plane taken off?" "We're still at the gate," Naomi said. "But Daddy, they're preparing to leave. They're going to make us take off, and Zara needs a hospital. She needs help right now." "Listen to me very carefully," Marcus said. "That plane is not going anywhere. Do you understand me? Not 1 inch. I'm going to make some calls. You stay with your sister. Help is coming." The white woman, who'd been standing a few feet away looking smug and untouchable, overheard part of the conversation and laughed. "That's right, call your daddy. See what good it does. You think some phone call is going to change anything? You think anyone's going to care what happened to you too?" Naomi looked up at her, this elderly white woman in her expensive jewelry and designer clothes, this person who'd nearly killed a child and felt nothing. And for the first time since the beating started, Naomi felt something other than fear. She felt rage. Cold, clarifying rage. "My father is going to make you pay for what you did," Naomi said quietly. "You have no idea what's coming for you." The white woman rolled her eyes, completely unbothered. "Sure he will, sweetie. I've been dealing with people like you my whole life. You make noise, you complain, you threaten, and then nothing happens. Because people like me don't face consequences. That's how the world works. The sooner you learn that, the better." Around them, passengers were finally starting to react more visibly to what had happened. The woman in row 13 was on her phone calling 911, her voice shaking as she described the assault. The businessman had stopped recording and was standing now, his face pale, looking like he might be sick. The elderly man who'd looked away was staring at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Their guilt was written across every face. But their guilt changed nothing. It didn't help Zara. It didn't undo their silence when it mattered. Christine was kneeling beside Zara now, holding the little girl's hand, tears streaming down her face. "Come on, baby," she whispered. "Stay with us. You're going to be okay. Help is coming. Just hold on." But Zara didn't respond. Her face was swelling badly now, her breathing getting more labored. The man with medical training looked at Christine and shook his head slightly. "This is bad. This is really bad. If we don't get her to a trauma center in the next few minutes, we could lose her." Those words, "we could lose her," hit Naomi like a sledgehammer to the chest. Lose her? Her sister? Her Zara? The girl who'd braided friendship bracelets for both of them last week. Who'd made a card for Mama with glitter and stickers. Who'd been so excited about flying first class that she'd taken a selfie in her seat before that monster appeared. "You can't die," Naomi sobbed, grabbing Zara's limp hand. "You hear me? You can't leave me. Mama needs you. I need you. We're supposed to see Mama together. You promised. You promised me." Zara's fingers didn't squeeze back. Her eyes didn't flutter open. She just lay there, a broken 12-year-old girl whose only crime had been sitting in a seat she'd been assigned, existing in a space where a racist woman thought black children didn't belong. The captain's voice suddenly came over the intercom, interrupting the normal pre-flight announcements. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a delay. Please remain seated while we address the situation." We'll provide updates as soon as possible. The white woman frowned slightly at this. A delay? She looked around, noticing that the cabin door was still open, that ground crew were moving urgently outside, that something bigger than she'd anticipated was happening. But she still looked confident. Still looked like someone who'd gotten away with things her entire life and expected that pattern to continue. Naomi's phone buzzed. A text from her father. 5 words that would change everything. The plane is not moving. Then another text. Airport police on their way. And another. I'm calling the captain directly. And another. She will pay for this. Naomi looked up at the white woman who'd hurt her sister, who stood there so smug and certain of her immunity from consequences. And Naomi felt something shift. The powerlessness she'd felt, the helplessness of being a child in a world where adults could hurt you and get away with it, started to transform into something else. Small and fragile, but there. Because her father wasn't just any father. He wasn't just a man making empty threats. Marcus Williams was the vice president of operations for this entire airline. He had the power to ground planes, to call captains directly, to make things happen that seemed impossible. And he was about to unleash all of that power on behalf of his daughters. The white woman didn't know it yet, but her world was about to come crashing down. Suddenly, the cockpit door opened and the captain emerged. A tall black man in his 50s, his uniform crisp and professional, his expression grave. He walked directly to the white woman, and his voice carried authority that made everyone in first class go silent. Ma'am, I've just received direct orders from executive management. This aircraft is not departing. Airport police are boarding now to place you under arrest for assault of a minor. I need you to remain exactly where you are. The white woman's face went from smug to shocked in an instant. What? Arrest? This is ridiculous. These girls were causing problems. I was simply disciplining them. You beat a child unconscious, the captain said, his voice cold. You committed a violent assault in front of 40 witnesses. And you did it because of their race. That's not discipline. That's a hate crime. The color drained from the white woman's face. She looked around desperately, seeing passengers staring at her now with horror and disgust instead of the passive silence she'd enjoyed during the attack. The businessman was nodding, his recording ready as evidence. The crying woman was pointing at her, confirming to someone on the phone that yes, that's the woman who did it. Do you know who I am? The white woman sputtered, her confidence finally cracking. My husband is an attorney. My family has connections. You can't do this to me. The captain's expression didn't change. Ma'am, I don't care who your husband is. You beat a child. That child is currently unconscious and may have brain damage. And the father of these children happens to be my boss. So yes, I absolutely can do this to you. And I will. Footsteps echoed from the jetway. Heavy, purposeful footsteps. Airport police officers were boarding the aircraft, their faces set and serious. Behind them, paramedics with a stretcher rushed through. And behind them, moving faster than anyone expected, was Marcus Williams himself. He'd been at the airline headquarters 20 minutes away. He'd broken every speed limit getting here. And now he was on his daughter's plane, and his face was a mask of controlled fury that made even the police officers step aside. Daddy, Naomi sobbed, and Marcus dropped to his knees beside his daughters. He gathered Naomi into his arms with one hand while his other hand gently touched Zara's face, his fingers trembling as he felt how cold her skin was, how shallow her breathing. I'm here, baby girl, he whispered to Naomi. Daddy's here now. And he looked at Zara, at his baby's broken body, and something in his expression hardened into steel. Nobody hurts my children and walks away. The paramedics moved with controlled urgency that somehow made everything feel more terrifying. They surrounded Zara's small body, checking vitals, inserting in 4-line into her arm, strapping a cervical collar around her neck. One of them, a woman with kind eyes and steady hands, looked up at Marcus and her expression told him everything he needed to know before she even spoke. We need to move her now, she said quietly. She's showing signs of severe head trauma. We're talking possible skull fracture, brain bleeding. Every second counts. We've got a pediatric trauma team waiting at Detroit receiving. Marcus nodded, unable to speak, his hand still holding Zara's limp fingers. His baby girl, who'd kissed him goodbye that morning with excitement in her eyes, was now being loaded onto a stretcher with tubes and monitors attached to her body. He watched them work, feeling helpless in a way he'd never felt before. All his power, all his authority, all his money and position meant nothing in this moment. He couldn't fix this with a phone call. He couldn't make his daughter's eyes open with his job title. Naomi stood beside him, blood drying on her face, her body shaking with shock and trauma and fear. She watched them lift her sister, watched Zara's arm fall limply off the stretcher before a paramedic gently placed it back. That image, her sister's lifeless arm, would haunt Naomi for years to come. "I'm going with her," Marcus said, not a question but a statement. "Sir," one of the police officers stepped forward. "We need your statement first. And we need to secure this scene. This is now a crime scene." Marcus turned to look at the officer, and his expression made the man take a step back. "My 12-year-old daughter is in a coma because a racist woman beat her with a shoe while 40 people watched and did nothing. You want my statement? Here it is. Arrest that woman right now. Charge her with everything you possibly can. Assault, battery, hate crime, attempted murder if my daughter doesn't make it. And then get out of my way so I can be with my child." The white woman, who'd been standing frozen as her comfortable world collapsed around her, finally found her voice. "This is outrageous. I want my lawyer. I'm not saying anything without my lawyer. You can't prove I did anything wrong." "Can't prove it?" The businessman in the gray suit stood up, his phone in his hand, his voice shaking with emotion he'd been too cowardly to show when it mattered. "I recorded the whole thing. Every blow. Every time these girls begged for help. Every second that you beat a child while smiling. It's all here. In high definition. And I'm sending it to the police right now." Other passengers started speaking up, their voices overlapping, their guilt driving them to finally stand up. "Too late. Always too late. I saw everything," the woman from row 13 said, tears streaming down her face. "I watched you hit that little girl over and over. I should have stopped you. God forgive me, I should have stopped you. But I'm not going to be silent now. I'll testify. I'll tell everything." "Me too," said the elderly man who'd looked away. "I saw it all. Every horrible second." The white woman's face cycled through emotions. Denial. Fear. Then something uglier. Defiance. "So what if I hit her?" She refused to move. She was disrespectful. She needed to learn. This is blown completely out of proportion. She probably faked being hurt to get attention. The silence that followed that statement was absolute. Even the passengers who'd stayed quiet during the assault looked horrified now. To watch a child get beaten into unconsciousness and then suggest she was faking it required a level of racism and cruelty that took everyone's breath away. Marcus looked at this woman, this elderly white person who'd nearly killed his daughter and felt no remorse, and he made a decision. The plane is staying right here until the police finish processing this crime scene. Every passenger who witnessed this and stayed silent, you're all being interviewed. Your names, your contact information, everything. Because you let this happen. You watched a child get beaten and you did nothing. "Sir," another officer interjected carefully. "We can't force passengers to stay. We can request voluntary statements, but they have rights." "Then request away," Marcus said coldly. "But make it very clear that their silence during a violent assault makes them witnesses to a felony. Make it clear that their videos are evidence. Make it clear that if my daughter dies, if Zara doesn't wake up, every single person on this plane who watched and did nothing will have to live with that for the rest of their lives." The passengers shifted uncomfortably. Some looked ashamed. Some looked angry at being called out. But none of them could deny the truth of Marcus's words. They'd had a choice. Between comfort and courage. Between staying seated and standing up. Between recording and rescuing. And they'd chosen wrong. They'd chosen themselves over two children who'd needed them. The paramedics were moving Zara toward the exit now, the stretcher rolling carefully down the aisle. Naomi started to follow, but Marcus caught her arm gently. "Baby girl, you're hurt too. You need to be checked." "I'm fine," Naomi said, even though blood was still trickling from the cut on her cheek, even though bruises were already forming on her arms and back. "I need to stay with Zara." I promised her we'd see Mama together. I can't leave her. Marcus looked at his eldest daughter, at this 14-year-old who'd thrown herself over her sister to protect her, who'd taken blows meant for Zara, who'd been brave when every adult around her had been a coward. And his heart broke all over again. "Okay," he said softly. "We'll both go. But first we make sure justice happens here." He turned to the police officers. "I want her arrested now. I want her charged with everything possible. I want her held without bail because she's clearly a danger to children. And I want every passenger who recorded this to send their videos to the prosecutor's office by the end of today." Mr. Williams, the lead officer, said, pulling out handcuffs. "We're placing her under arrest right now. Detroit PD takes crimes against children very seriously, especially hate crimes. This woman isn't going anywhere except jail." The officers moved toward the white woman, who suddenly seemed to realize this was actually happening. Her confidence evaporated completely. "Wait," she said, her voice rising to a panicky pitch. "Wait, you don't understand. Those girls were in the wrong seats. They were causing problems. I was just trying to maintain order. This is a misunderstanding." "Ma'am," the officer said as he took her arm, "you have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it." The handcuffs clicked shut around the white woman's wrists and reality hit her all at once. Her face crumpled. She started crying, loud theatrical sobs that felt obscene after the real tears Naomi and Zara had cried. "Please," she begged. "Please, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I have grandchildren. I'm a good person. This will ruin my life." "My daughter is in a coma," Marcus said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the cabin. "Your life? Your reputation? Your comfort? None of that matters to me. What matters is that you beat my child unconscious because she was black and you thought you could get away with it. And I'm going to make sure you pay for that every single day for the rest of your life." The officers led the woman away, her expensive shoes clicking on the floor, her designer clothing now wrinkled and stained, her carefully constructed image of respectability destroyed by her own racism and violence. Passengers watched her go, and maybe some of them felt satisfaction. But mostly they felt shame. Because they knew they'd failed. They knew their silence had enabled this. They knew they'd have to live with that knowledge forever. Marcus took Naomi's hand and they followed the paramedics off the plane. But before he left, he turned back one last time and looked at every passenger in first class. His voice carried authority and pain and fury. "All of you had a choice," he said. "Every single one of you could have stopped this. Could have stood up. Could have used your bodies to shield 2 children from violence. But you chose to be bystanders. You chose to record instead of rescue. You chose your comfort over their safety. I hope it was worth it. I hope when you're lying in bed tonight, thinking about a 12-year-old girl fighting for her life in a hospital, I hope you can live with the choice you made." Then he walked off that plane, holding his wounded daughter, following his unconscious daughter, and the passengers were left sitting in their expensive seats with their expensive phones and their cheap courage that had come far too late. The plane sat at the gate, empty of perpetrators but full of guilt. And somewhere in an ambulance racing toward a hospital, a little black girl named Zara fought to survive an attack that should never have happened. An attack that 40 people witnessed. An attack that only one 14-year-old had been brave enough to try to stop. The fluorescent lights of Detroit Receiving Hospital's pediatric trauma unit were too bright, too cold, too sterile for the kind of raw human pain filling the waiting room. Marcus sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, his expensive suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Beside him, Naomi had been cleaned up by nurses, her wounds bandaged, but nothing could clean the trauma from her eyes. They'd been waiting for 2 hours. 2 hours of doctors rushing in and out of emergency surgery. 2 hours of nurses with carefully neutral expressions giving them no information. 2 hours of not knowing if Zara would live or die, if she'd wake up, if she'd be the same girl she was before a racist woman decided black children didn't deserve to exist in peace. Marcus had called his wife. That had been the hardest phone call of his life. Telling Patricia, already fighting cancer, already weak and struggling, that their baby was in a coma. Hearing her break down over the phone from a hospital bed in Houston. hearing her beg him to save their daughter while she was too sick to travel, too fragile to be there. The guilt in her voice, the mother's instinct to protect her children being denied by her own failing body, had shattered something inside him. "I should have been there," Patricia had sobbed. "I should have been on that plane with them. This is my fault. I should have protected them." "This isn't your fault, baby," Marcus had said, his own voice breaking. "This is the fault of a racist woman who chose violence. This is the fault of a system that still treats black children like they're less than human. This is everyone's fault except yours." But Patricia couldn't hear that. What mother could? Her babies had needed her and she'd been 5 states away, too sick to help, and now Zara was fighting for her life. Naomi sat curled in her chair, staring at nothing, replaying the beating over and over in her mind. She kept seeing Zara's face, the shock in her sister's eyes the first time the shoe connected, the way her little body had tried to curl up to protect itself, the moment when she'd gone limp. Naomi had scrubbed her hands 3 times, but she could still feel Zara's blood, still see it on her fingers. A nurse approached them, her expression carefully composed. "Mr. Williams? The surgeon would like to speak with you." Marcus stood so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. Naomi jumped up beside him, grabbing her father's hand. They followed the nurse through double doors into a small consultation room where a tired-looking black woman in surgical scrubs waited. Dr. Michelle Richardson, according to her name tag. "How is she?" Marcus asked before the doctor could speak. "Is my daughter going to be okay?" Dr. Richardson gestured for them to sit. Her face was kind but serious, the expression of someone who'd delivered too much bad news in her career. "Zara is stable," she said, and Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief. "But we need to talk about what stable means in this situation." She pulled up X-rays on a screen, pointing to areas that meant nothing to Marcus but clearly meant everything to her medical expertise. "Your daughter sustained severe head trauma. Multiple blows to the skull. She has a fractured orbital bone here, which caused significant swelling around her eye. She has a concussion. And most concerning, she has bleeding in her brain. We call it a subdural hematoma." "What does that mean?" Naomi asked, her voice small and terrified. "It means blood is collecting between her brain and skull, putting pressure on the brain tissue. We've relieved some of that pressure surgically, but the next 72 hours are critical. She's in a medically induced coma right now while her brain heals. When we bring her out of it, if we can bring her out of it safely, we won't know the full extent of the damage until she wakes up." Marcus repeated, the word feeling like a knife. "If you can bring her out of it?" Dr. Richardson met his eyes with compassionate honesty. "Mr. Williams, your daughter's injuries are severe. I've seen adults die from less. The fact that a child, a 70-pound 12-year-old girl, survived this level of violence is remarkable. But survival and recovery are 2 different things. There's a possibility of permanent brain damage, cognitive issues, memory problems, personality changes. Or she could wake up completely herself. We simply don't know yet." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. His baby girl. His Zara who wanted to be an artist, who made everyone laugh, who'd been so excited about life. That Zara might not come back. A different Zara might wake up. Or no Zara might wake up at all. "Can we see her?" Naomi asked, tears streaming down her face again. "Please, I need to see my sister." Dr. Richardson nodded. "She's in pediatric ICU. She's intubated, which means she has a breathing tube. She has monitors and IVs. She doesn't look like herself right now. Her face is very swollen. I'm telling you this so you're prepared. But yes, you can see her. Actually, I encourage it. Even in a coma, patients can sometimes hear familiar voices. It might help her fight to come back." They followed Dr. Richardson through more sterile hallways, past rooms where other families faced their own nightmares, until they reached a room with Zara's name on a whiteboard outside. Marcus stopped at the doorway, suddenly afraid. Afraid to see his daughter like this. Afraid that seeing her would make it too real. Afraid that he wouldn't be strong enough to handle what was behind that door. Naomi squeezed his hand. "Together, Daddy," she whispered. "We face this together." They walked in, and Marcus's heart shattered completely. His baby girl lay in a hospital bed that seemed far too big for her small body. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped and hummed, keeping her alive. Her face was swollen beyond recognition, purple and black bruises covering the beautiful brown skin he'd kissed goodnight 1,000 times. Her head was partially shaved where they'd operated, bandages covering the surgical site. She looked tiny, fragile, broken. "Oh, baby," Marcus whispered, moving to her bedside. He took her small hand carefully, mindful of the four, and brought it to his lips. "Daddy's here. Daddy's so sorry. I should have protected you. I should have kept you safe." Naomi stood on the other side of the bed, crying silently, holding Zara's other hand. "Remember when we made those friendship bracelets?" She said softly. "Remember how you used all the purple thread because it's your favorite color? I still have mine on. See?" She held up her wrist, showing the braided bracelet. "I'm not taking it off until you wake up. Until you can make us new ones. So you have to wake up, okay? You have to come back." The machines beeped steadily. Zara didn't move, didn't respond. Just lay there breathing with mechanical assistance, her young body fighting battles that no child should ever have to fight. A social worker appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand, apologetic expression on her face. "Mr. Williams? I'm sorry to interrupt, but the police need to know if you want to press charges. And there's been media interest. The video from the plane has gone viral. CNN is calling. Local news is outside. They want a statement." Marcus looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. Media? Statements? His daughter was in a coma and the world wanted sound bites? "Tell the media they can wait," Marcus said, his voice hard. "Tell the police yes, we're pressing every charge possible. Tell anyone who asks that I want that woman prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And then leave us alone. I need to be with my daughter." The social worker nodded and disappeared. But the interruption had reminded Marcus of something. He pulled out his phone, saw 17 missed calls from work, from board members, from airline executives wanting to know what happened, what the response should be, how to handle the PR crisis. He turned his phone off completely. Let them wait. Let the company wait. Let the whole world wait. Right now, the only thing that mattered was this little girl fighting for her life in this hospital bed. Hours passed. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting medications, speaking in soft voices. Marcus and Naomi didn't leave. They stayed by Zara's bedside, talking to her, reading to her, playing her favorite songs on Naomi's phone, reminding her of why she needed to fight, to wake up, to come back to them. Night fell. The hospital grew quieter. And in that pediatric ICU room, a father and daughter kept vigil over another daughter, praying to whatever God might listen that a 12-year-old black girl who'd been beaten for sitting in an airplane seat would survive, would recover, would get the chance to live the life she deserved. Outside that room, the world was exploding. The video was everywhere. Millions of views. Outrage trending on every platform. Calls for justice flooding social media. But inside that room, none of that mattered. Inside that room, there was only love and fear and desperate hope. And Zara slept on, unaware of the firestorm her suffering had ignited, fighting a battle in the darkness behind her swollen eyelids, deciding whether to come back to a world that had hurt her so badly. The question was, would she choose to return? And if she did, would she ever feel safe again? 72 hours after the beating, Zara opened her eyes. It happened at 3:47 in the morning on the third day. Marcus had dozed off in the chair beside her bed, his hands still holding hers. Naomi was curled up on a cot the nurses had brought in, refusing to leave her sister's side. The machines beeped their steady rhythm, the only sound in the quiet ICU. Then Zara's fingers twitched. Just slightly. Just enough. Marcus's eyes flew open instantly. He'd been a light sleeper since his daughters were born, trained to wake at the smallest sound, the slightest movement. He looked down at Zara's hand in his and saw her fingers move again. Then her eyelids fluttered. "Zara?" He whispered, his voice cracking. "Baby girl, can you hear me?" Naomi was awake immediately, scrambling off the cot to Zara's other side. "Zara, it's Naomi. It's your sister. We're right here. Come on back to us." Zara's eyes opened slowly, struggling against the swelling and medication. Her gaze was unfocused at first, confused, trying to understand where she was and why everything hurt. Then her eyes found her father's face and something like recognition flickered there. "Daddy?" The word came out raspy and small, barely audible around the breathing tube they'd removed the day before. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face, didn't even try to stop them. "I'm here, baby. Daddy's right here. You're safe now. You're in the hospital, but you're safe." Zara's eyes moved to Naomi, and her sister grabbed her hand, squeezing gently. "I'm here too. We both are. We've been here the whole time. You scared us so bad, Zara. So bad. What happened?" Zara whispered, her voice weak and confused. "Why does my head hurt so much?" And there it was. The moment Marcus had been dreading. Having to tell his 12-year-old daughter that she'd been beaten into a coma by a racist woman for the crime of existing while black. Having to explain that the world had hurt her in ways no child should ever be hurt. Having to watch her innocence die all over again. Dr. Richardson rushed in, alerted by the monitors showing Zara's change in consciousness. She did a quick neurological exam, checking reflexes, asking questions, assessing cognitive function. Zara answered slowly but correctly. She knew her name, her age, where she lived. She remembered getting on the plane. She remembered the white woman's face twisted with hate. But when Dr. Richardson asked what happened next, Zara's expression went blank. Her eyes filled with fear and confusion. "I don't remember," she whispered. "Why can't I remember? Why am I here?" "It's okay," the doctor said gently. "Some memory loss around traumatic events is normal. Your brain is protecting you. It might come back or it might not. Either way, you're awake and responding well. That's what matters right now." But Marcus could see it in his daughter's eyes. The fear. The knowledge that something terrible had happened even if she couldn't remember the details. The understanding that she'd been hurt badly enough to end up in a hospital with tubes and machines keeping her alive. That awareness, that trauma, was written across her young face. Over the next few hours, as Zara became more alert, pieces of the story had to be told. Carefully, gently, but honestly because she deserved the truth. Marcus explained about the beating, about the woman who'd hurt her, about Naomi protecting her. He explained she'd been unconscious for 3 days, that she'd had surgery, that she'd survived something many people wouldn't have. "Where's Mama?" Zara asked suddenly, looking around the room with growing distress. "I want Mama. We were supposed to see Mama. Is she okay?" And that broke Marcus all over again. Because Zara, even after being beaten into a coma, even after brain surgery and 3 days unconscious, was worried about her mother. Was still thinking about the trip they'd been taking, the sick mother they'd been flying to see. "Mama's in Houston, baby," Marcus said softly. "She's still getting treatment. But she knows what happened. She's been calling every hour. She wants to see you so badly. And you will see her. I promise. As soon as you're strong enough to travel, we'll get you to her." "The woman who hurt me," Zara said quietly, her voice small and scared. "Where is she? Is she still on the plane? Is she going to come here?" "No, baby," Naomi said firmly, protective anger flashing in her eyes. "She's in jail. Daddy made sure of it. She can't hurt you anymore. She can't hurt anyone anymore." Zara nodded slowly, processing this information. Then she looked at her sister, really looked at her, and noticed the bandages on Naomi's face, the bruises on her arms. "Did she hurt you too?" Naomi glanced at their father, then back at Zara. "I tried to protect you. I covered you. It's okay. I'm fine. What matters is you're awake. You came back to us. You protected me?" Zara's eyes filled with tears. "You got hurt protecting me?" "Always," Naomi whispered, leaning down to carefully hug her sister, mindful of all the tubes and wires. "Always and forever. That's what sisters do." They held each other, these two black girls who'd learned the hardest way possible that the world could be cruel, that racism was alive and violent, that sometimes the people who were supposed to help would choose silence instead. But they'd also learned something else. They'd learned they had each other. They had a father who would move heaven and earth for them. They had a family that wouldn't let injustice go unanswered. Marcus watched his daughter's embrace and felt something settle in his chest. Zara was awake. She was talking, thinking, being herself. Dr. Richardson had said it was early to know if there'd be permanent damage, but so far, his baby girl seemed like she was still there. Still Zara. Changed, traumatized, but alive and fighting. He stepped out of the room to make a phone call he'd been putting off. To his wife. To tell Patricia that their daughter had opened her eyes, that the worst might be behind them. He could hear Patricia's sobs of relief through the phone, could feel her desperate wish to be there, her guilt at being absent during this nightmare. "I'm bringing them to you," Marcus said. "As soon as Zara can travel, I'm bringing both our girls to Houston. You need to see them. They need to see you. We all need to be together." "What about that woman?" Patricia asked, her voice turning hard despite her weakness. "What's happening to her?" And that's when Marcus's expression shifted from relief back to cold fury. "She's being arraigned today. Assault with intent to cause great bodily harm. Ethnic intimidation. Child abuse. The prosecutor is pushing for the maximum sentence. But I want to be there. I want to look her in the eye when she hears the charges. I want her to know that she didn't just attack 2 random black children. She attacked my daughters. And I'm going to make sure she pays for that every single day." "Good," Patricia said fiercely. "Make her pay. Make everyone who watched and did nothing understand what their silence cost. Change those policies you've been talking about. Make sure this never happens to another child on your airline." "I will," Marcus promised. "I swear to you, Patricia. This changes everything. The airline, the policies, the training, all of it. I'm going to make sure Zara's suffering means something. That it creates change that protects other children." He ended the call and turned back to look through the window of Zara's room. His daughters were talking quietly, Naomi holding Zara's hand, both of them looking exhausted and traumatized but alive. Alive and together. And Marcus Williams made a decision. He wasn't going to just prosecute the woman who'd hurt his daughters. He was going to dismantle every system that had enabled the attack. Every policy that had allowed bystander silence. Every training program that had failed to prevent this. He was going to use his power, his position, his resources to make sure that what happened to Zara and Naomi could never happen again. The reckoning wasn't over. It was just beginning. And it was going to be absolute. The Wayne County courtroom was packed. Media filled the back rows, cameras positioned to capture every moment. Civil rights activists sat in solidarity, some holding signs demanding justice. And in the front row, Marcus Williams sat with Naomi beside him. Zara was still too weak to attend, still recovering in the hospital, but her presence was felt in every corner of that room. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Patricia Mathis presiding. Everyone stood as Judge Mathis entered. She was a black woman in her 60s, her expression stern and uncompromising. She'd built her reputation on refusing to tolerate injustice in her courtroom, and today's case had her full attention. The defendant, Margaret Ann Whitmore, was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit that looked obscene against her expensive jewelry they'd allowed her to keep. Her lawyer, a slick-looking white man in a $1,000 suit, walked beside her with practiced confidence. But Margaret herself looked different than she had on that plane. Gone was the smug superiority. Now she looked small, scared, diminished. The charges were read. Assault with intent to cause great bodily harm. Ethnic intimidation, Michigan's hate crime statute. 2 counts of child abuse in the 1st degree. Each word landed like a hammer blow in the silent courtroom. "How does the defendant plead?" Judge Mathis asked. Margaret's lawyer stood. "Not guilty, Your Honor. My client maintains her innocence. This was a misunderstanding that's been blown completely out of proportion. We request bail be set at a reasonable amount so Mrs. Whitmore can return to her family while we prepare our defense." Judge Mathis looked at him with an expression that could freeze water. A misunderstanding? She looked down at the file on her bench. "I've reviewed the police report. I've seen the medical records. I've watched the video that 47 million people have now seen online. A 12-year-old child was beaten into a coma, counselor. She had brain surgery. She flatlined twice in the ambulance. Where exactly is the misunderstanding?" "Your Honor," the lawyer pressed on, "my client is a 72-year-old grandmother with no criminal record. She's a pillar of her community. She poses no flight risk and no danger to society. Before the judge could respond, Marcus Williams stood. His lawyer tried to pull him back down, but Marcus gently moved his hand away. "Your Honor, may I address the court?" Judge Mathis studied him for a moment. "You're the father? Marcus Williams, vice president of the airline?" "Yes, Your Honor. And I need the court to understand something. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a moment of poor judgment. This was a deliberate, sustained, violent attack on 2 children because of their race. That woman looked at my daughters, saw their black skin, and decided they didn't deserve to sit in seats they'd paid for. She beat my 12-year-old daughter with a shoe. Repeatedly. While my 14-year-old tried to shield her sister with her own body. His voice broke slightly, but he pushed through. While 40 passengers watched. While people recorded on their phones. While my babies begged for help. And when Zara collapsed unconscious, bleeding from her head, that woman smiled. She was proud of what she'd done. She felt justified. Because she spent 72 years believing that black children are less than human and that she has the right to punish them for existing in spaces she thinks they don't belong. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even Margaret's lawyer had stopped shuffling papers. Marcus continued, his voice stronger now. "My daughter may never fully recover from this. The doctors don't know yet if there will be permanent brain damage. If her personality will be changed. If she'll have seizures for the rest of her life. But I know one thing for certain. Zara will never feel safe on an airplane again. She'll never trust that adults will protect her. She's 12 years old and she's learned that the world sees her blackness as a threat deserving of violence. That's the real crime here, Your Honor. Not just the physical assault, but the theft of a child's innocence and sense of safety in the world." Judge Mathis nodded slowly. Then she turned her gaze to Margaret Whitmore, who was crying now, theatrical sobs that fooled no one. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you have anything to say?" Margaret stood shakily. "I'm sorry," she whimpered. "I never meant for this to happen. I just wanted them to move. I have grandchildren their age. I'm not a monster. Please, I can't go to jail. I have a heart condition. I won't survive in there." "You have grandchildren?" Judge Mathis's voice could have cut steel. "Did you think about them when you were beating someone else's grandchild? Did your heart condition prevent you from swinging a shoe at a child's head? Did being a grandmother make you show mercy to these 2 young girls?" Margaret's sobs got louder. "My lawyer said I shouldn't say anything more." "Probably wise," Judge Mathis said coldly. "Here's my ruling. Bail is denied. The defendant is remanded to custody until trial. Given the severity of the charges, the video evidence, and the defendant's complete lack of remorse until facing consequences, I see her as both a flight risk and a danger to the community." "Your Honor, please," Margaret's lawyer protested. "My client is 72 years old. And Zara Williams is 12 years old," the judge shot back. "Your client didn't consider age when she beat that child unconscious. I won't consider it when deciding her freedom. She stays in jail. Trial is set for 60 days from now. And counselor? I suggest you prepare an actual defense because I'm going to hold your client accountable for every single thing she did to those children." The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the courtroom. Margaret Whitmore was led away, still crying, still protesting, still not understanding that her racism had finally caught up with her. That the system that had protected people like her for generations had finally, in this moment, chosen to protect black children instead. Marcus sat back down, trembling slightly. Naomi grabbed his hand and squeezed. "You did good, Daddy," she whispered. "Zara would be proud." Outside the courthouse, media swarmed them. Microphones thrust in their faces. Questions shouted from every direction. "Mr. Williams, how is your daughter? Will you sue the airline? What do you want to happen to Mrs. Whitmore?" Marcus stopped at the top of the courthouse steps and turned to face the cameras. When he spoke, his voice carried across the crowd, and by that evening his words would be played on every news channel in America. "What happened to my daughters shouldn't happen to any child. But it happens every day. Black children are seen as threats, as problems to be controlled, as less deserving of protection and dignity. This case is getting attention because I have power and resources. Because the video went viral. Because people couldn't ignore it. But what about all the black children who are hurt when no one is recording? Who don't have fathers with influence? Who suffer in silence because the system isn't designed to protect them? He paused, emotion thick in his voice. I want Margaret Whitmore held accountable. Fully. Completely. I want her to face the maximum sentence for what she did. But more than that, I want change. Real change. I'm implementing new policies across the entire airline. Zero tolerance for racial discrimination. Immediate removal for anyone who displays bias. Mandatory intervention training for all staff and passengers. Because silence is complicity. Those 40 people who watched my daughters get hurt and did nothing? They're part of the problem too. The questions erupted again, but Marcus held up his hand. My daughter Zara is awake now. She's going to survive this. But she'll carry these scars forever. Physical scars on her face that will remind her every day of what hatred looks like. Psychological scars that will make her afraid of the world. And those scars are on everyone's hands. The woman who beat her. The passengers who watched. The systems that enabled this. All of us who allow racism to continue unchecked. He took Naomi's hand. We're going back to the hospital now. To be with Zara. To help her heal. And then we're going to Houston to see my wife who's fighting cancer and couldn't be here when her daughters needed her most. We're going to try to put our family back together. But we'll be back for that trial. And we'll be there for the sentencing. Because Margaret Whitmore is going to learn that black children matter. That their lives have value. That you can't hurt them without consequence. The crowd parted as Marcus and Naomi walked to their car. And across America, millions of people watched the footage and felt something shift. Anger at what had happened. Shame at their own silence in similar situations. Determination to do better. To speak up. To protect vulnerable children regardless of their skin color. The video of the beating had been viewed almost 50 million times now. But Marcus Williams's courthouse speech? That went even more viral. Because it wasn't just about one family's tragedy. It was about every black family's fear. Every black child's vulnerability. Every moment when racism turned violent and bystanders chose comfort over courage. Change was coming. Slowly. Imperfectly. But it was coming. And it started with a 12-year-old girl named Zara who survived what should have killed her. And a 14-year-old girl named Naomi who'd been brave enough to shield her sister. And a father who refused to let their suffering be meaningless. The reckoning had begun. And this time, it wouldn't be silenced. 6 months later, Margaret and Whitmore was sentenced to 12 years in prison. The courtroom erupted in applause that Judge Mathis didn't silence. Zara sat between her parents, her scars still visible but fading, watching the woman who'd hurt her being led away in handcuffs. She didn't feel victorious. Just tired. The scars on her face would never completely disappear. The nightmares came 3 times a week. Loud noises made her flinch. She couldn't see shoes without feeling sick. But she was alive. She was healing. That had to be enough. 2 weeks after the sentencing, the Williams family boarded another plane. Different airline this time, though Marcus could have flown his own. They'd chosen a smaller carrier where Zara felt safer. Patricia was in remission now, strong enough to travel home. The family was finally together again. Zara gripped her mother's hand during takeoff, her breathing rapid, her body tense. Patricia held her close and whispered prayers. Naomi sat on her other side, protective as always. And Marcus watched his family, these 3 strong women who'd survived cancer and racism and violence, and felt grateful for imperfect survival. At the airline, policy changes were implemented. Passenger intervention training became mandatory. Discrimination complaints were investigated immediately. Staff who failed to protect vulnerable passengers faced termination. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't prevent every incident. But it was something. It was progress built on his daughter's pain. Zara never became the carefree 12-year-old she'd been before. That girl had died on an airplane floor while people watched and recorded. But she became something else. Stronger. More aware. An advocate for other children who'd been hurt. She spoke at schools about standing up to racism, about being brave when adults failed you. She survived. They all survived. The justice was real but incomplete. The healing was ongoing but imperfect. Just like life. Just like the long, hard work of living while black in America. Zara Williams is 16 now. The scars on her face have faded to thin white lines that catch the light sometimes. The scars inside run deeper. She still has nightmares. She still carries pepper spray even though she's just a teenager. She still freezes when she sees elderly white women in expensive jewelry. But she's here. She's alive. She's fighting. Her mother beat cancer. Patricia Williams has been in remission for 3 years, watching her daughters grow into young women who understand both the cruelty and resilience required to be black in America. Naomi is 17 now, planning to study law so she can fight for children who don't have powerful fathers to protect them. Margaret Whitmore sits in a Michigan prison, serving year 7 of her 12-year sentence. Some say that's too harsh for an elderly woman. Those people didn't watch a 12-year-old child get beaten unconscious. They didn't see the blood. They didn't hear the silence of 40 cowards who chose comfort over courage. And that's the real story here. Not just one racist woman's violence, but 40 people's silence. 40 witnesses who had phones but not voices. Who had eyes but not courage. Who recorded but didn't rescue. If this story broke your heart, if you felt rage at those bystanders, then answer this question honestly. What would you have done? Would you have stood up? Would you have physically put yourself between that woman and those children? Or would you have been passenger number 41, recording while telling yourself someone else would help? Like this video if you think black children deserve the same protection as white children. Subscribe to this channel if you believe silence is complicity. Share it with someone who needs to understand that racism isn't just history, it's happening right now, every single day, in airplanes and schools and stores and streets. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is. Tell us if this video changed you. Tell us if you'll be braver next time you witness injustice. Because there will be a next time. There's always a next time. Zara survived. But the next child might not. Unless you decide to be different. Unless you choose courage over comfort. Unless you refuse to be a silent witness to violence. Don't just watch this video and feel bad. Do something. Be something. Be the person who stands up. Be the voice that refuses to stay quiet. Be the courage that saves a child's life. Because Zara Williams is alive today partly because her sister was brave enough to shield her. Partly because her father had power to demand justice. But she's also alive because eventually, someone had to care enough to act. Next time, let that someone be you. This is Hyper Racism Channel. We expose the truths they don't want you to see. Subscribe. Speak up. And never, ever stay silent when children are in danger. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Now go be the change this world desperately needs.